episode 3. We got the amazing Christiansen. He is one of the top guitarists in his field. He's an incredible educator, performer, and he does he does a lot of stuff. And so we're going to talk about all of that. It happens. It's better it happens now. No problem. And we're hopefully going to get pretty deep, about music, and then maybe some dangerous stuff. We don't know. We'll see. But we just wanted to hang and really have a nice, chill conversation. So, Corey, what's going on? I mean, first of all, let's start today and let's expand.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you're aware there's a pandemic.
I heard about it.
You heard about it. Oh, man. Yeah, it's man, there's just some crazy stuff. Like, it's been an interesting year, right? I mean, like, those of us who were teaching are teaching more. Those of us that were performing are performing less. It's for me personally, like, the last year has really been kind of an awesome experience in a way to, like, kind of refigure, like, maybe what I want to accomplish with my life, and and think about what it is to be an artist and what it is to be an educator. And I've been really, I mean, I hate saying this because I know it's been rough on a lot of people, and it's been rough on me too, financially losing some opportunities and stuff. But I've tried to weigh that out with the positives, in my own life anyway, of, like, having some quiet time to, like, really think, and really evaluate, like stuff that might even be more important than, like, making money at a gig, right? And like setting the stage for where I want to be in 10, 15 years.
Right.
And that's kind of what I've been, focusing on, sharing some of that message with, some of my students, but also my friends. And because I believe that there's, safety in numbers, right? And there's strength in numbers, but also that, like, high tide raises all ships, and so, like, if I'm figuring some stuff out and it's working, that hopefully I elevate, the people that are in my sphere of influence, and the same thing happens, it becomes reciprocal. And so I believe, and to say what that is, and define what that is, my sphere of influence, like, part of that is just anybody that's into music, right? And anybody that's trying. I mean, I've always thought that, like, we're all just this big family of, like, brothers and sisters, and it's just, it's really important that we that we take care of ourselves so that we can take care of other people. And that doesn't mean, like, necessarily handouts, but it's like information. It's keeping spirits elevated, keeping, we all know horror stories about people who have gotten down during this pandemic, and some really tragic stories that have come out of that. But, like, I'm just trying to do my part, when you ask, like, what's going on, I'm just trying do my part to, like, keep things moving forward and just keep, like, a good vibe happening. One thing that was really rewarding for me, selfishly, but I hope there were some positives out of it. When this pandemic hit, I made it a point that I was going to call, like, not text, not email, but I was going to call, one of my friends every day and just be like, what's up, man? Like, just making sure that, like, keeping the lines of communication open in a really human way, because one of the things that was really dangerous about this whole thing is, like, non-human things started to, kind of creep in, right? Like isolation. That's not really a healthy thing. And so I really was like, hey, I need to not just talk about this. Like, I need to just say, like, okay, I can do this much every day. And then stick to that and do it. And I wish I could say that I called somebody every day. It probably wasn't every day, but man, it was pretty close. And it was just awesome. I mean, still is awesome. It's just fantastic to keep in touch with people in a human way, which is talking, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We're so thankful that you called us today. We're happy to be on your list.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, because like this kind of stuff is really awesome, right?
Yeah.
Corey, are you in Utah right now?
I am. I'm in northern Utah. Yeah, I'm in Smithfield, Utah. That's where my house is, for all the stalkers out there. Yeah, I'm like, it's this really small town that I grew up in when I was a kid that's right on the border of Idaho.
Oh, wow.
Like the valley that I live in is, if you've seen the movie Napoleon Dynamite, like
Yeah.
that's where I grew up, and that's
Whoa.
where I live.
What was the impetus for you moving? Were you always there, or did you like move back to this?
No, I moved. So yeah, it's kind of weird. My dad was ran the guitar program at Utah State University, so that's how I got into music.
Okay.
Right. And to be honest, like there's been a lot more growth in the area that I live in now, like everywhere. But it's really beautiful. So it seems like we're getting a lot of growth. Like people are moving here from all over the place because we have the #1 safest community in the United States.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think in the last 12 years, there was one time that we dropped to #2, but we've always been like #1. It's just this incredible place. And I grew up here, and I fell in love with music and fell in love with specifically like straight ahead jazz music. And I realized that I just had to, I had to go somewhere else. And so I moved to Florida, studied with Jack Peterson, who I will say is arguably the most influential jazz guitar teacher in the history of the instrument. There's probably some other good contenders, but he's right up there, man. When you figure he started the Berklee guitar program in the late 60s, and Mick Goodrick and John Abercrombie, that first crop of 6 students he had. And then he came and started the North Texas program. I was just lucky to, catch him in his last 2 years of teaching down in Florida.
Wow.
And then I moved to St. Louis, and I lived in St. Louis for quite a while. Worked for the Mel Bay publication company as their senior editor and AR guy. We started Mel Bay Records. Had a lot of fun there. That job kind of took me about as far as it could. I loved working for Bill Bay, one of the greatest guys in the industry. But I was on the road all the time. I was touring 6 months out of the year. And I just kind of realized, I was like, hey, I think I could live anywhere. And so I moved back home, man, like an old dog. Moved back home to northern Utah. And
So this is one of those towns that you can walk around 5 a.m., not a problem. No one's
yeah.
gonna bother you.
No, yeah. I mean, like honestly, it's an incredible community. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, it's not like we don't have our problems, and we don't have certain issues, that come up. But honestly, like part of the reason I moved here is because I live right in the foothills. I should probably, well, I'm not going to do it. I was going to say I could walk out and I could show you the mountains behind my house. Like I live at the base of these mountains that go to 10,000
Wow.
feet. And I can give my kids, like, before they had cell phones, I give my kids a walkie-talkie in the summer in the morning, and I'd be like, dinner's going to be at 6.
Aw.
That's
so
like,
cool.
I love that.
Yeah, that's really how it should
like
be.
I'll see you at 6 o'clock, and don't get bit by a rattlesnake, So like, it's just this amazing place. I mean, people spend a lot of money to come here and enjoy the outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very involved with a lot of outdoor activity, so that was an important thing for me. I had to find some balance in my life because you have to go through a phase as a musician where like all you do is music. Like if you want to be like
Right.
proficient enough on your instrument, like that's just what it takes nowadays. Like you have to be able to like kill it on the instrument, and it's very rare that somebody can do that without like almost becoming a recluse, right, in a way, and just like devoting yourself to that. But then at the same time, like you have to have lived life to be a great musician,
Mhm.
and you have
Mm,
to have some balance, and you have to have some things that like your music can actually be about,
Mhm.
other than just technique and
that's a good point.
theoretical knowledge. And, I just kind of realized that I was out of balance for kind of a big chunk of my life. And so I wanted to get back into, like having some experiences to play music about.
Mhm.
I love. I've never been to Utah specifically, but definitely kind of the western United States, more like Grand Teton area. I've been around there. I
Yeah,
would
that's just
love to
down the
move out
street.
there and just kind of enjoy all that. And I feel like it's so cool that the kids can just go out and have a natural life, because I know when we think about having children, we're like, oh my God, they're going to grow up with their eyes on a screen, and
Yeah.
it's just going to be
Yeah.
weird. But
My entire family comes from like, just farmers, really, country people, farm people. And
Yeah.
so when I saw this world, it was like it was shocking, and it was so much different. I'm still like not coping, but reconciling like my past and future,
mm,
and a lot of the
Yeah.
things, that people who were born in a modern environment take for granted. They really just have no idea, and you don't have any idea until you go to that world and you experience
Yeah.
that stuff. And
Well, I love hearing you say that because I think that's really accurate,
I
Armin.
mean, yeah,
Like they just don't know that
you
world.
don't, yeah. And so it's humbling. It's also like it puts into perspective a lot of things, like I said, that we take for granted. But I should have mentioned this earlier, because maybe the audience is gonna wonder how I learned about Corey. Actually, the first time I saw you, I was in, I want to say, a freshman or sophomore at USC,
Yeah.
and you were doing a master class, and it was,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
They used to go there like almost every 2 years or something to
yeah,
hang out.
and you were doing. I still have a video or two from that master class somewhere.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, Pat Kelly shot the video on his Zoom, and I grabbed it from him like as soon as I could. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
And so
Put it up on YouTube. Did you make some money off
no,
that?
I didn't.
Oh, you
No
blew
one's
it.
seen it. No one's. I, I was, yeah, I was gonna sneak up behind you and just take all those royalties, all those cash.
You wouldn't be the first guy.
Yeah.
We can talk about that later.
Yeah. That's happened to me a couple times too, actually. Um,
Oh yeah.
and it's a learning experience, I guess. But
Yeah.
more
Oh
more on that. And
yeah.
I met Corey, and there's a lot of things about him. First of all, that I mean, beyond the fact that he was world class musician, he also was just super chill. And I think that has a lot to do too with with your upbringing. It seems like the f- just the families you've been interacting with and growing up with, and
Yeah.
I'd love to come to that part of
Yeah.
town. And
yeah.
Big deal. I mean, we are products of our environment, right?
mm,
And that's I've got 4 kids, and raising 4 kids as a guitar player is tough, man. Because
yeah,
my wife and I had decided, that when we started having kids, that she was not going to work outside the home. And at first I was like, oh my gosh, that's going to put a lot of pressure on me as a musician. But and I had to step my game up. It's kind of funny because when my third child was born, I was actually in LA, and I was playing a gig, and Sid Jacobs came
mm,
and to the gig, and he said, Corey, every time I hear you, you sound better. I'm like, or no, he said, every time you have a kid, you sound better.
wow,
And I was like, every time I have a kid, I have to sound better.
yeah,
You know, my kids can't go hungry or not have shoes because I decided to be an artist.
right,
It's like I have some responsibility. And um, but I did want them to have like the healthiest upbringing that they could have.
mm,
And my wife and I decided that the thing that we could do was give them a life that had some perspective of and I'm going to get political here for a minute,
Mm-hmm.
but give them a perspective of a rural environment
Mm-hmm.
and an urban environment.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
We wanted to have that balance, so that's like, because I think one of the big problems that we have in life, and what I've tried to do as an artist, and I'll probably, I might hijack some of this and talk about this, like, but from a really early period, not just like this last election or, like the last, even 4 years, like for a long time, I have recognized, I'm like, I have some really, really great friends that come from a very rural background,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm aware of what their problems and their concerns are.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have best friends that are from, an urban perspective, and I'm aware of a big chunk of what their problems are. And you know what I've figured out?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the same problems in
Mm-hmm.
a way,
Oh.
right? And like what's not happened very well with it, and in my opinion, with the powers that be of media or whatever, is that like they really thrive on not letting those two things
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
communicate, right? And or framing the conversation in a way that is a war rather
Mm-hmm.
than a constructive,
Mm-hmm.
dialogue. And so my wife and I were just like, look, we're checking out of this, like we're going to check out of this framework. And it's like, look, people are people. There are beautiful people everywhere. There are beautiful people that, that think differently. There's also some terrible people, right? I mean, like there's some terrible, terrible people. They might not always be who you think they are. And, and that was just something that was really, really important to us. It's like, I wanted to raise like Renaissance children, so to speak, that it was like that they could understand art and they could understand, things of the urban world, but they could also survive on the island if they had to,
Yeah.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's Armin and I kind of, just to piggyback off what you're saying, we talk a lot about this, where it seems like today they're trying to kind of pinpoint everybody into one perspective or just one track mind, but it's like you need to have a wide perspective, and if you don't have a wide array of experiences, you're not going to be able to be empathetic towards somebody else. And then actually on the reverse side, you can think that you're being so empathetic towards somebody else, but actually you're doing the opposite because you're,
Yes.
I don't know, you're controlling at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
But, and Charles, don't you think, I mean, it's kind of amazing, right? Like we have this huge blessing in our lives that we were, whatever happened, like by our own desires or the situations that our families put us in, or that, like a friend suggested, we ended up becoming musicians and we loved it enough to study it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And like artists of any kind, in especially musicians, I think, and maybe it's just because I know that, that category the best, but like we are so blessed to have studied the music that we have, because it teaches us a little bit about other people.
Yeah, totally.
That aren't like us. I mean, we study classical music. There's a lot of great things to learn about human nature in classical music. And if we've studied any kind of Black American music, you will find that there's just as much beautiful aspects of humankind found in that music, right? And it's all these things that come together. And we're like, if you're really aware as a musician, you can let that experience shape you into being a genuinely empathetic person, which to me, it's almost like that's the high art of being a human, right? Is being empathetic.
There's one part of like I wish I could. There's so many things people do to broaden their minds, and then one of them is like traveling. They might go to a different country, and another one might be just like skydiving or something. You know what I mean? Something like that. And I always I think like, man, if everyone also had music in their lives, that would be that other way
Totally.
that they could do it all the time. You know what I mean?
Totally. have said for 20 years now, I'm like, can you imagine if when the UN got together, they had to start off by playing a few choruses of blues?
That'd be so crazy.
That's awesome.
I mean,
Yeah.
like 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 seriously, we'd have to have like, our cat sit down with Putin and be like, dude, you guys got to give us three choruses before we listen to you talk.
That would ease up the vibe, or not, or he would
Or
show
not.
something else. You know what I mean?
That's the
Yeah,
thing. I mean, it would be like
yeah.
it would like so like cut to the
It would cut to the
chase,
chase
right?
real fast. Yeah.
That's, and
Oh,
Armin and I, we have like a band down here in Houston, and we've really been trying to use like not only our podcast platform but also our music platform, whether whatever venue we're at, as sort of a soapbox. Not really a soapbox. We're not preaching up there, but we are deliberately saying like music is something that unites all of us, and it kind of
yes.
washes away the differences when you're just everybody's purely
Yeah.
in the music together.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think that that's just so important, and it's so funny that you bring it up like with the UN, because that would be hilarious to watch, but I really think it would.
Yeah. And it would be great too if it was like, okay, look, yeah, we played some blues, but like next month, like we're gonna play like a bird blues. So like you're gonna have to like up your game.
Keep him honest.
Yeah, keep them honest. Yeah, exactly.
You
Oh my
mentioned
goodness.
you were trying to keep the vibe high, and
Yeah.
just trying to figure out what you got to do or what you haven't done before regarding the situation. It's obviously a weird time for everybody. So like Chad and I, like he had already mentioned, we started this band. We got
Yeah.
we
Right at the
got
beginning of the pandemic.
right at the beginning of the pandemic.
Oh, gee, perfect timing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then through like I don't
And
know.
then
It was
move.
truly a blessing. But we can basically we've basically had the opportunity to play every day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Wow. I mean,
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Also, that's a plus of being in Houston though, because Houston
yeah,
is pretty open
yeah.
comparatively.
Yeah. I mean,
You mean that, like, as
as a
far as
sit.
the lockdown
Yeah,
has been concerned, they haven't enforced it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean
like say Seattle.
exactly.
Yeah.
But even early on, when everything really was shut down, we were, and this is when it kind of started. We were just in the park every day, just playing in the evening, and people would come out every night, and we started to gather a following because of that. And they were like,
Wow,
"Thank you
that's
guys
awesome.
so much."
It was a crazy thing when everything was actually really literally locked down. That's what we were doing every day, and people were coming, and then people were asking when the next time was, and then they were bringing other people, and then we're like, and that was the impetus to really start Houston Ensemble. We're like, we got to do this. We got to bring the life
Cool.
back to these people because they're thirsty for the life right now.
Yeah, because it's like, look, every society has music,
Hmm.
right? And you take music away from the people, and I don't mean like Spotify. I don't. That doesn't even count.
No.
Like, it doesn't count. That's why I get so offended, like when Spotify CEO is like,
Yeah.
artists need to create more content. I'm
Uh-huh.
like, you need to shut your mouth.
Uh-huh.
Like, honestly, like you have been raping us for years
Yeah.
now. Like, you don't get to tell us what we need to be doing.
Yeah.
Like, we had this figured out before you showed
Yeah,
up.
I'm sure he'd love us to be more like these. Pardon my language. These animals making more products for him to profit off of. But hey, look.
I have a really hard time with it, and I've had a lot of conversations about that, because it's an important. Okay, this is where it gets complicated as a musician, right? It's like we as musicians serve a really important purpose in society,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So does a doctor,
Yep.
right? But like the doctor only gives stuff away after they've reached a certain point where it's like, hey, my practice is doing well and I can go help these other people and do
Right.
it pro bono. We all do that,
Hmm.
right? But we also have to be aware of like what is our responsibility to make sure that we can take care of ourselves and we can set up a situation that takes care of the other people around us,
Right.
right? as far as being able to, make a living, and we have to monetize what we're going to do. I do think that because we are not living in a situation where our society structure of government takes care of artists, right? We live in a capitalist society, so that's the rules we have to play by.
Yep.
So we can be generous, but we also have to position ourselves in a way that we don't get taken advantage of.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's the game that they made. Like, we didn't make this game, you know what I mean? And we're
Yeah,
just playing it. So, but
yeah, and that's a good way to put it,
yeah,
Armin. Because it's a game. You got to figure out how to to play it. And my personal take is a take on it is, okay. I've got to think about, how do I play this game so that I win, but how do I play this game so I don't hurt anybody else
right.
that's doing the same
Yeah.
thing right?
But I really wanted to get into that more, but there was a question that I was gonna ask you before, which was, what are some of the projects you're into right now? You,
Yeah,
let us know what's going on.
yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting because I was so I kind of hit the scene in the year 2000,
Okay.
and I was in a situation where um, it was kind of like that crux of the old model
Yeah.
with record labels, and then the new model, because Napster was a thing, right? That was the
Mm.
first one that everybody went, "Oh my gosh, what is going to happen?" Like, it just changed the game,
Yeah.
right? And um, and so I've been kind of going nonstop since 2000, and then 2020 hits, and I just really recognize this as a time to be like, you know what, maybe you ought to take a break from all of this. So I have to say, I have not been much of a contributing member of, like, new art for the last 10 months, or 11 months, or whatever it is now,
Mhm.
just something like that. And I have really taken this time to just be like, less playing, more thinking,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and and more teaching. I mean, my thing is, I'm musiclessons.com. I mean, that's
Mhm.
been my thing, which is a cool site that I kind of helped start years and years ago, and then it ended up, with this pandemic, being something that's really helpful. But it's a website where any musician can go and set up an online studio,
Mhm.
and it will, through the platform, you're able to record your lessons and upload also pre-recorded lessons, and the artist gets the huge lion's share of the profit. um, but it also creates a library for each individual student, and they can grab some. It's been a really fun project. I've been working on online learning since 2009. I was really early in on the game. I started a company called Stelline.com, and I was fairly successful with that. And then when music lessons came around, I can't remember what year that was. They asked me to basically, shut down my platform and migrate everything over to them. And,
Mhm.
there was a business deal that went down to make that happen.
Mhm.
And so I've been kind of focused on that. But, really, I just thought this was an opportunity for the first time in my adult life to just take a breath. And that's not how it should be for everybody, because like for somebody like you guys, like, you're like, hey, we put this band together, and then all of a sudden the pandemic hits. Like, that's not the time. Like, if I was your business
Yeah.
advisor, I'd be like, hey, you don't follow my lead.
Right.
Like, don't be taking a break right now. Like, this is an opportunity to, like, get in it,
Right.
and,
Yeah.
like, and do this thing. But for me, it was really, it was an opportunity to be like, hey, maybe take a breath and evaluate where you want to go the next
Mhm.
10 years, and take this time to think. And and I had a lot of people that would send me emails or texts like, man, would you do a concert, a live stream? Like, we really need the music. And I sounds kind of shallow, but I was kind of like, hey, I kind of really need the money. Like, so are you saying that if I do this, that you'll send me $20? Like,
Mhm.
Yeah.
it was,
We're seeing a lot of
and I
that.
didn't want to get into that. And I was kind of in a dark place, to be honest,
Mm,
and I didn't want to be there. So like, really, I have taken an absurd amount of time off. And it so happened that I had my sabbatical for this whole year lined up also. So I haven't had to
great.
teach at the university. I've been, really able to sit here and practice a little bit, but also just like work through some of the things that I had suggested in my sabbatical that I wanted to do, which was think about like how do younger musicians, like how can I advise them to monetize their craft and their art? What's it like? What are some of the things that need to be present so that you can take luck out of the equation in making it as a
Right.
musician?
Mm.
Um, so I have not been visible at all, even in my own community, very much as a performer. I think I've played out 4 times in the last year, um, which is, really, really low for me. But I have to say that just recently I have, scheduled the studio. I'm going in on March 5th and 6th to record a trio record with Carl Allen, the great drummer Carl
Oh,
Allen,
cool.
and Ben Williams
Oh,
Awesome.
on bass.
Hmm.
And dig this, man. It's like, because I've been doing a lot of original music for the last 10 years. No originals, it's all standards, and it's live to 2-track. So,
Wow.
like, when we
whoa.
get done recording, the mix is done,
Nice
it's
is
all
done.
on
Yeah.
take, no overdubs, no patches, no nothing, man.
Hmm.
It is going to be a 2-day recording session of us just going in and playing tunes,
Whoa.
Hmm.
and when we get done, we'll have a record.
Dang.
And
Great.
I was just talking to somebody last night, actually, because I was like, for a lot of my career, um, what I did was to push myself, because like you guys are figuring this out. You get out of school and it's really awesome for like 6 months that nobody's telling you what to work on, right? And then like for me, it was like maybe this hasn't happened to you yet, but it will if it has. But then you're like, nobody's telling me what I should work on. Like you hit this thing where it's like, oh, geez, and you got to figure out ways to improve. And so hopefully you learned over your course of 6, 10, whatever years of education at the higher level, that you learned how to teach yourself, right?
Right.
I mean, that's what we're all trying to do when we get out.
Right.
But it's hard to find people to give you some honest feedback, because do you guys get like this? Oh man, you sound great. Like, oh, everything's killing, right? And what I really want in my life is like, yeah, that was good, but think about these couple of
Right.
things. And in my adult life, I had 2 guys really that shot straight with me. One was Joe Diorio. Even though I wasn't his student, whenever I played with Joe, he pulled me off to the side and he'd be like, hey, you know what? You ought to think about this. And it was like really great advice. Oh, and Bruce Foreman. I still have Bruce Foreman. Bruce still gives me like, only when I ask, but
Yeah.
I'll be like, hey man, what'd you think of the last thing? And he's like, yeah, it sounds good. And I'm like, come on, Bruce, show me the truth. And we've been at lunch and he's like, are you serious? You want to go there? And I'm like, yeah, I need it, And he's like, okay,
Yeah.
here's some things I think you should think about, like you're going a direction different than I go, but like Bruce is one of my best friends. And so he's really honest with me. But Vic Juris, man, rest in peace, Vic. But like Vic was the guy that always gave it to me really, really straight. And so, but you get to a certain point where it's like, you got to challenge yourselves. And so the way I did that was I always made sure that I hired bands when I went on the road that were like so much better than me. Like that, it was just like, these guys are going to destroy me night after night after night after night. Right? And like, this is going to be painful, and it's going to, like most of the people in the audience won't know how bad I got beat up, but like, I know how bad I got beat up. And so I hired my own mentors.
Mhm.
That's just kind of what I did. I was like, I always got to make sure that I've got somebody that's like more seasoned. Usually that comes with age, but sometimes I hire younger guys that I'm like, man, this guy's going to kick my butt in areas that I'm, deficient in.
Yeah.
But what I realized with this, like in this pandemic, is like, you know what I got to do to push myself this time is go in and do a record with no safety net.
Mm-hmm.
No safety net. Like no way to go back. And I mean, there always is a way, but we're not going to do that. Like I've dedicated, like we're going one room, all the bleed, all the everything. and we are just doing a live record
Mhm.
and no safety net.
Mhm.
And like, man,
Yeah,
that's a tough thing, right?
it
I
is.
mean, like,
Hey, I
yeah.
have a story about Carl Allen. When I went to a performing arts high school in Cincinnati, Ohio,
Oh,
and
cool.
we always were bringing in really cool people to do master classes, whether it was like Carl Allen, Benny Golson, Antonio
Yeah,
Sanchez,
yeah.
Branford
The
Marsalis,
cats.
Chick Corea. Like all these people came to my high school, which is so crazy. But
That's awesome.
I really specifically remember the Carl Allen one, and he came in there, and I was pretty young at this point. I was probably a sophomore, I think, and
Yeah,
he was already really stern, and like he's like, any of y'all have kids in here? And we're like, no. He's like, okay, y'all should be practicing all day. You don't have any
yeah,
reason not to. And we're like, oh
right.
man. And then he's like, so I'm gonna play a melody on the drum set, and y'all tell me if you can tell me what it is. And he's playing the melody. And by the way, at this point, like, I know a decent amount of tunes,
Yeah,
so I
no
don't think he's
tunes. Yeah,
gonna do anything too wacky. But he's playing it, and he stops. He's like, "What is it?" And we're all like, "Oh man, I have no clue whatsoever."
yeah,
And he's like, "Really?" He's like, "Stomping at the Savoy, come on!" And he's basically just like shocked that none of us knew it, and we're all like, "I would have never heard that in my whole life." But I love that masterclass because he really opened me up, one, to that idea. Then he also
yeah.
opened me up to just, the seriousness at which he took the music and
Yeah, man.
playing
I mean,
and being critical.
there's here's the thing. There's always room for people to be successful at the top, right?
Yeah.
And so if you've got educators that will push you to be at the top, I mean, that's like the greatest blessing you could have in your life. Carl has become a really dear friend over the last 12 years. To me, I love Carl Allen, but he's just such a fun drummer to play with because he's so melodic.
Mm.
you know and he's got all that kung fu, like that, like he can mess with the time, and he can like twist you up in knots and fold your clothes while you're still in them.
Right.
Like he does, like he can do all that stuff, but like there's this melodic nature about, and this playfulness of, of like what he does that I really love. So, and I've never played with Ben Williams, so
I'm trying
like,
to. I don't know. I
He's a
feel like I recognize that name totally. I don't know his face
he
though.
just released an album last year called "I'm a Man," or don't quote me on that.
Does he play with
But
somebody frequently?
Pat
Pat
Metheny.
Metheny,
The Unity, like Pat Metheny Unity Band has
Okay.
been like Ben Williams and Antonio Sanchez and Chris Potter.
Oh.
but he really plays with everybody. I mean, Ben Williams is a
Okay,
great.
then
I'll
I'm
show you.
sure I've seen that.
Yeah,
His name just wasn't in my head. That's
yeah.
cool though.
Yeah, it was, and here's how I put the band together, right? And I think this is kind of this is a good way to do it. I mean, I was like, okay, the way your album sounds is going to be whoever your drummer is,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I
I've
feel
always
that.
thought that, like, like just follow Miles Davis' career, right?
Hmm.
Those bands, like until you get to the '80s stuff where it was kind of funky and it could have been a lot of different people, but like when you listen to Kind of Blue, you're like, yeah, the band sounds like Jimmy Cobb, right?
Hmm.
And then you listen to the smoking stuff, like smoking, burning, whatever that whole series, you're like, yeah, that sounds like Billy Joel. And then especially when you get to the '60s, right? It's like, yeah, that band sounds like Tony Williams, and and I've always thought about that. I'm like, man, the drummer. So whenever I put a project together, the first thing I think about is like, who's the drummer going to be? Because that's going to be the sound of my band.
Mm.
No matter what I do, no matter what I write, sound, the aural, the spectrum is like going to be
Yeah.
created by the drummer. And I've always tried to hire guys that I thought had a vibe, that are going to do that. So Carl has vibe. But then I asked Carl, I'm like, so I know a lot of bass players, but who do you want to like? Who do you like to play with? And like he gave me a list, and I was like, okay, well this is cool. I like to play with Ben. Like Ben would be great. Carl hooked up Ben, and then next thing I know, I'm talking to Ben, and now we got a record date.
Wow.
And like I couldn't be happier. I'm also like, there's a side of me that's a little terrified, knowing that it's like, that we're recording a quarter-inch tape. It's
That's
like,
so cool.
man, there's a lot that could go wrong. And the studio also has 2-inch tape, and they're like, hey, we could do like, like more tracks and do 2-inch tape. I'm like, no, man, let's take the safety net away. And like, let's just go 2-track. And like, I'm just making a pact that we won't get the razor blades out, and we aren't going to cut anything. Like, we aren't going to just, like, I'm committed. Even if I suck, I'm releasing this album.
That's that. I like that. Also, I wanted to, for the people who are listening, I just wanted to tell them this little story. Speaking of like teachers and that kind of stuff, there's always a little special something, whatever it is, to every podcast for every guest that we have, and we spoke about it before we started recording. But when I was a freshman in high school, I got this little award at high school to go to the Jamie Aebersold Jazz Camp, and I was not like really deep into jazz, but I did like it a lot and wanted to get more into it. And then I got there and I had a combo group, and the combo teacher was Corey, which was super cool. And so we're just coming full circle here back today.
It's and that's as a teacher, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This like, man, this 14-year-old kid or whatever that I worked with at the camp is like stuck with it and gone on to be really successful. It's so cool.
Thanks, man.
So cool.
Yeah, it's been a weird time. I was about to go. So I actually studied classical music still at Rice University here in Texas. And I was about to go do a jazz degree at Manhattan School, but then COVID happened, so I just deferred it because New York is just so much more shut down than Houston.
Right.
But there are many silver linings to this in the sense that Armin and I like moved in together as roommates. For everybody who always likes to twist it. And we got to start the podcast, and we got to do the band, and we've really just been having a great time. And like, we found this house that had this perfect studio in it, and that's what we're in right now, which is dedicated to like
so cool.
the music. It's dedicated to the podcast. It's dedicated to rehearsals. So it's super fun. And I really only feel like it's on the up and up. So it's cool to just culminate everything and just take the positives out of every experience.
Yeah. Well, my goal was to be able to emerge from this with some kind of direction, some kind of direction in my life. And not that I had bad direction before, but like the whole Rona thing is just, it has really, it's given me time, and it's given me some quiet to really think. Like I'll tell you this. So like, this is kind of crazy, but when Rona first hit and everything was shut down, right? It was March, April-ish, like the middle of March, this is kind of crazy. Like, one of my side hobbies is I do a lot of fishing and I do a lot of hunting. And I'm actually, like, this last year I did a lot of guiding. I've guided some hunts.
Whoa.
And where you go, and it's like, the land, the animals really well, and you're helping another hunter go out. So I've been kind of involved with this. And but one of the things that I wanted to do is spend some time in the mountains. So I'd go looking for sheds, which is like when an antler animal like a deer or elk, in the spring, they lose their antlers. Some of them lose them a little bit earlier in the winter.
The velvet.
Yeah, well, and then they grow them back in the velvet, right? So they grow back every year. And so I'd go out and I'd take, like couple of my kids or whatever. I'd be like, okay, we got 7,000 acres, that we're gonna cover, in the mountains today. And man, like, as I think back on this, I'm like, those moments of quiet, while I was out like looking for sheds, is like, it ended up being priceless. Because I was like, okay, the noise of the world has shut down here for a little while, and I'm going to go out. And it was so weird because, like, the place where I do this, like, you usually hear airplanes or jets, and like, there was nothing, right, for that first month. Like, it was silent. Like, I've never experienced the outdoors like that before, like, where there was nothing. and nobody was out, nobody was on the freeways driving to these places. Like, it was so trippy, and God, it was so cool. I mean, it was such an awesome like window of time in my life, because I'm there's some things I'm gonna that I don't really share with anybody, that I think I learned, and I was like, man, this is really a blessing to have this quiet, because so much of the world is not quiet.
You're making me
Yeah.
jealous right now. I'm thinking like I gotta like just move back, go back. I'm done. You know what I mean? Like what? Like
Well, don't be done, but like, if there's one thing I can share, it's that like finding balance in my life has been really great. And okay, so here you go. You guys are going to get a world premiere here. I mean, not that it's that big a deal, but like I see a therapist every week,
okay.
and um, it's like it's like one of the greatest things in my life,
Mm.
is to go to talk to somebody and get like an unbiased opinion of like, hey, are you feeling like they can't tell you how you feel, but like a good therapist will make suggestions, based on a like talking to 10,000 people or
Right.
whatever, that,
Yeah.
that it's like, hey, you should try this. This might make you feel better, and this might make you like um, maybe be easier to get along with. And,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, whatever. Because, like, here's the thing, everybody's got stuff,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
right? And what Rona did for me was like really give me some quiet time to like deal with thinking about those kinds of things. And it's not like a crisis, but like, I've thought about this. We have this stigma in our society that like it's not okay. Like, you go see a therapist when you're like really messed up and suicidal or whatever. And yeah, that's probably sometimes true. Um, but how many people have been to see a doctor, like for
Mm-hmm.
something that's gone wrong with their body? Like, everybody,
Mm-hmm.
right? You go see a pro that's like, oh yeah, when your toe is bent the wrong direction, like that's not good, and like we gotta get it back into the right direction. I'm only saying that because I've broken my toe, I don't know how many times. So like there's things that you can do, and you go to talk to somebody who knows more about you, about how to fix that, right? With varying levels of crisis and varying levels of severity,
Yeah. So
right?
why don't we do that with our
With
spiritual
our
injuries?
exactly,
Mm-hmm.
Arm. I mean, you're exactly right. It's like this, because we've had this thing in like world culture that's like that's some kind of weakness,
Mm-hmm.
right? Hey, it's not weak that I broke my toe. I broke my toe doing jujitsu.
Mm-hmm.
It was the opposite of weakness. I was doing something really difficult,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like physically challenging.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I broke my toe. It's also maybe how I broke my nose. But there's like there's like a bunch of stuff that happens to our bodies. Well, there's more stuff that happens to your brain,
Right.
right? And and I think, as artists, I don't know if the art makes us more sensitive, or that because we're more sensitive we find our way into the arts. I don't know. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
how to answer that. It's probably a little bit of both,
Yeah.
right? But we see it in our culture a lot, and I mean our culture of being artists, that like that people who are hurting, and they've found ways to deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all there. I don't mind telling people like, yeah, man, I've had some stuff in my life that really sucked, and like Rona was awesome to have that quiet to like even process that stuff maybe even a little bit deeper, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to figure out a way, like a really healthy way to deal with that, is to play music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's one healthy way for me. It's one of the ways. And so, like I said, like finding that quiet, like that's become more of a priority now. I've been thinking about it, like, okay, the world's starting to open up, right? Okay, so I have to make sure that I have things in place that I can find that quiet time and those quiet experiences, and some of them are days long, right?
Mm-hmm.
To go like center myself and be like, okay, cool, like you've got this, you've got a plan, and if the plan doesn't work out,
Mm-hmm.
then you go with like work like water, and figure out how to move through terrain.
I before we started, I heard a little bit about this Facebook rant that you made,
Mm-hmm.
and I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Mm.
Oh yeah. Oh man. Okay. So I just there's a lot of there's a lot of I think there can be a lot of stress on educators these days, to like encourage students to go into this business that's very challenging, and it can appear that there are diminishing opportunities, right? And so I'm going to preface all this with, I think that there are educators that are trying to do, like maybe in the back of their mind that they think they're trying to help. Okay, I'm going to say that. I'm going to say, like, okay, let's assume that maybe that's the case. And then I'll probably go away from that. But I've just had too many conversations with educators that have said things to me like, going into jazz is a dead end street, and music education is dying, and like painting this very bleak picture um, of like what the music industry is,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm sure you guys have experienced it,
Mm-hmm.
either from your peers or colleagues, or from it, maybe even from educators. And I think the whole thing is just a bunch of crap. I think it's just like, it's just jive as the day is long to paint that picture, because like my second choice of a career was to be a lawyer, and that's hard. I know lawyers that don't make it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I had somebody that had told me too. They said, "Man, it's really hard for me when I tell my friends that my son is a professional musician, and they kind of wince, and then they tell me some story about how their cousin or their uncle or whatever tried to make it as a musician
Mm.
and didn't. It was really tough." And this person said to me, it was just brilliant. They're like, "Well, I really want to ask them, well, were they any good?
Mm-hmm.
Like, did they struggle because they sucked?"
Mm-hmm.
But she's like, "But that would be rude." So instead, as artists or those that support artists, we sit here and we silently take it.
Mm-hmm.
We go, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I've kind of got a point in my career where, like, I just don't have to be quiet about this stuff anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to be quiet, because I think it's unhealthy, and I think that it doesn't do anybody any service. I think we can be realists about the obstacles that might be in front of us, but like, what the world doesn't need right now is like more lawyers. What we need is more people who have studied music
Mm-hmm.
and learned how to be empathetic,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe go into something else, which is fine. But what we need right now is more people who are good at anything in the arts,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
because it makes you better at everything else. So I'm just done being silent about it. So yeah, I called out a few people, not by name, but just in recent conversations, and I'm like, this is terrible. And here's the thing: most of the people that say music education is dying, or you'll never make it, as a performer or whatever, and I've said this publicly on my Facebook page, and I'm like, that's probably true if you play as well as the person that told you that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Because most of the time, people who have painted this really bleak thing, like, oh, you won't be able to make it and it's dying and it's whatever, like, they can't play that well.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds rude when I say that, but like, I don't know. I feel like more and more I'm going to meet rudeness at the same level, and not that I'm trying to be rude, but I like, if you're going to be blunt with me, as an educator, and some of these are like respected about like how this is such a bleak thing, then I'm going to be bleak about like maybe your skill set has made you feel like that.
Boom.
Because I'll tell you what was
I
that,
was like,
Armin?
boom.
Yeah, mic drop
Yeah.
moment, right? Like, because but do you see how that is? Like,
Yeah,
as a culture
totally.
and as artists, we've kind of sat around and listened and taken this rhetoric for too long, as far as I'm concerned.
And this
Yeah.
Like,
this goes for everything too, like not even just music. We have a culture today of kind of I mean, I think this is what you're getting at, but giving every single person a trophy to some extent. And it's like we do,
Yeah.
you know, you do want to be nice. You're not trying to like destroy
Sure.
somebody, but at the same
Right.
time, you got to be honest about the situation. Be like, yeah, you know, you're in jujitsu and maybe you get your butt whooped or something, and be like, yeah, you got your butt whooped because you're not as good yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to say, that was, not to like sidebar this, but I'm not training right now. But I did for, maybe like 2.5 years, I mean,
That's sweet.
enough that like I can handle myself at the grocery store if I needed to, right? Like if somebody wants to mix it up in the parking lot, I'd be like, oh, we shouldn't really do this,
Mm-hmm.
but like there is a certain amount of confidence you get where it's like, well, like
Yeah.
there's just things that
Yeah,
work,
and you might
and
be amazing at jujitsu, by the way. Don't take that as a personal blow.
yeah, no, not at all. No, I'm not,
Okay.
because here's the thing: I trained with guys that are really good,
Mm-hmm.
and there's levels, and that's how it is in music also, right? But what I would never do is say to one of my black belt friends, like, oh, you'll never make it at jujitsu. Like, who am I to say that? Like, I'm
Yeah.
not, I'm a white belt, that just probably should have tested to be a blue belt, but never did. Okay. But I'm still like, like I'm a baby at this thing. The reason I did it is because it was so good for my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't worry about the mortgage. I didn't worry about my students or any of that stuff. When somebody's trying to break your arm, you're pretty focused on the fact that somebody's trying to break your arm.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're not worried about the stuff that you worry for 22 hours a day, normally. It changes your mind to think about something else.
Mm-hmm.
It's so healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so awesome to get into this beginner baby kind of childlike learning mode too, where
Mm-hmm.
it's like I know nothing. I am so like new at this. And what I realized was that helped my music
Mm-hmm.
because it got me back into beginner learning growth mindset. And it was like, there's so much to learn, right? Because like this guy's breaking my arm like 9 times a day, like 9 times per session. Every 1 minute I'm compromised. And it's like, God, it was so great. But yeah, my rant more is about like, I have silently for years listened to subpar musicians tell me and others how tough it is to make it in the music business. And I'm done listening to the negativity, or at least silently, and I've had this conversation with a bunch of people. I'm like, look, when you're really, really good, opportunities just present themselves, like that's the first thing. I say there's 5 things you got to do to be successful. Number one, you got to be really, really good.
Yeah.
Because that takes luck out of the equation.
Right.
Like you have to be really, really good. And I mean, like that 1%, if you're there, it's not going to be hard to make it in the music business. People will always find a way. Like they'll always want to use you. Like, for gigs, they'll want to use you for sessions. They'll want to use you to
Right.
teach. You will find your people.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Second thing you got to do, you got to show up on time.
Mm-hmm.
Third thing you got to do is you got to be a good hang.
Mm-hmm.
Fourth thing you got to do, you got to wear the right threads.
Mm-hmm.
And the fifth thing you got to do is you got to be adaptable.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I'm like, if you do 5 of those 5 things, guess what, man? You're undeniable. Nobody can stop you. Like
Yeah.
you will find your people. You will find your, as they say, it's kind of cliche, but nowadays, but like you'll find your tribe, right?
I'd probably add one more to that.
What's that?
You gotta be prolific. If you are a good hang and you play well and you're responsible, but you don't do anything, no
Yeah.
one's gonna care that you got.
Yeah, it's
You
true.
got
Yeah,
you got to put
that's
yourself out there is what I would say to that as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I kind of file that under there, like if you're really good, that's what you're kind of doing. It's assumed, but it's probably
Right.
good to mention. It's probably good to mention that, Orban. I mean, that's a good maybe distinction.
Yeah.
But I'm like, look, if you do 5 of these things, luck's out of the equation. There's like no more luck. If you do 4 of these, 4 of those things, probably a pretty good chance you're going to be okay,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's any 4. You do only 3 of those things though, and all of a sudden it
It gets squirrely.
it's starting to get a little squirrely,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if you only do 2 of those things, chances are you're going to need some serious luck,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if you're only doing one of those things, it's just not going to happen for you,
Right.
Yeah.
I
right?
th-
I mean, it's like it won't happen. Like you can just see the percentages of your success, like just like becoming crushingly low, you know, like crushingly low.
yeah.
And it's, you know, I just kind of got to a point where I was like, I don't think I'm doing anybody any solids by being quiet about this stuff,
Right.
right? Like when I get approached with this kind of rhetoric from now on, I'm going to be less concerned about being polite and more concerned about being accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody that knows me should know, like, I'm a pretty polite guy. Like
Yeah.
I'm pretty easy to get along with, you know,
Yeah.
like I champion other people. I love to see, you know, people that I know be successful. I even like to see people I don't know being successful. That gives everybody hope.
Mm-hmm.
Success, like I said, high tide raises all ships, you know,
Yeah.
like I have, you know, tried to advocate the good vibe for my entire life. However, I'm kind of done being silent when people are negative. I had somebody that told me, you know, they were part of a wedding band kind of thing, you know, thing, and there's nothing bad about that. Like I think that's great. There's good money to be made. That's an important service that, you know, that musicians provide to a really important part of our society, which I think like a wedding is certainly something you celebrate,
Right.
and like you should use music to do that, and it should be a beautiful thing. But I had somebody that was complaining like, yeah, these, you know, I'm in this wedding band and it's so stupid when they ask us to play, you know, All of Me at the lounge hour, you know, because you guys know how it is to do a wedding band gig.
What's wrong with that song? It's a great song.
Great song. It's better in F than it is in C.
Oh, really? Okay. I could see that.
Yeah. Seriously, you go play that tune in F and you're going to be like, dang, this tune is slamming.
Well,
but C, it's weaker for some reason. Okay, anyway, I digress. But F is
we're
where
doing
that
it on
tune.
Friday with somebody, so maybe we'll try it in F on Friday when we record.
All of me, why not take all of me?
It's baller in F,
Okay.
and in C, I'm always like, what, you know, whatever, we'll play this.
Okay.
But they had specifically like made fun of the tune Misty, actually.
Oh,
And
Also a fine
I
tune.
like that too.
it's a great tune, you know, and the lyrics are beautiful. I mean, like, look at me, I'm as helpless as a kitten up a tree.
Yeah.
Like, these are actually like lyrics that are metaphoric, right?
Yeah,
like they have some depth to them. They're
Yeah.
not like 13-cent poetry
Yeah.
that's deep as a sink, you know,
Right.
like there's some content there. And anyway, and then they made a jab and they're like, oh, and people that like jazz, blah blah blah. Like it was this insult, and I just had to step
Oh,
in.
that, you know who that? Can I guess? Can that guy even play jazz that good?
Well, of course not.
All right.
Of course not.
All right.
You know, but is a great cover band guitar player, but they suck, you know, at playing jazz, and they kind of. But this is what I said, and this got me in a little hot water. I said, most of the people that I know that don't like jazz don't like it because they heard it played so crappy at a wedding.
Right.
Wow.
Because I will tell you this, I have taken people that know nothing about art music to see Dave Liebman's group, and that's about as heavy of an experience as you could throw anybody in. That's like, hey, welcome to the deep end of the pool, right? And I'll tell you what one of my friends told me. We walked down, I said, so what'd you think? That was some heavy stuff. And he goes, I don't know what I was listening to. He said, I don't understand it. He said, well, first of all, he said, I really enjoyed it. But he's a writer, and so he was a little bit more, profound. He said, I don't know what I was listening to, even though I enjoyed it. But he said, but what I realized was I was witnessing truth.
Whoa.
That's really, and that's great that he
Holy
got
shit.
that, because that's true. That's
Right?
what's happening on stage when it's getting heated. What you're witnessing is truth.
Yeah. And he's like, he's a really deep guy, right? But he said, and it was like, oh my gosh, I wish I was that deep. But he said, I realized that what I was witnessing was truth, And he said even more than that. He said that it was undeniably eternal truth.
Oh yeah, okay, okay. So
Wow,
he
that's
he's
so cool.
he basically was talking about God but without saying God. You know what I'm saying?
And he's saying that I'm witnessing. Now think about this, because I've thought about this conversation with this guy a lot, and like not to get too religious or spiritual on it,
Yeah.
but if you believe in a higher
Right.
power, God creates.
Right.
What do we do when we're improvising
Yeah,
musicians or we're
we're
composers?
being little gods.
We we are being godlike,
Yeah.
Little
Yeah.
gods.
right?
Yeah,
I
totally.
mean, it's a godlike characteristic.
It is.
That's probably the better way I should put it.
I
So I'm
I remember. Hey, I remember. I remember going on a little rant a while back myself, and kind of in the same line you were saying, but I kind of went at it in a little more comedic sense. I was like, and I told people, I was like, when musicians have like magical powers,
yeah.
and you do, and it's like,
Oh,
and
you're gonna take me into dark water
yeah,
now,
that's
Arvin.
what I'm saying. So it's like we might, if you're a master musician, what you are is a master magician. You're like a Doctor Strange kind of person,
Yeah,
essentially.
well, it's true. Well, and for me, it gets even a little heavier than that, because everything about life carries a certain energy, and energy has a certain frequency,
Hmm.
right? Like, or energies have a certain
Oh yeah.
frequency, and so, like, I truly believe that as musicians, it's almost like we're keepers of the frequencies, right?
Yeah.
Whoa, that's
And
cool.
and that this whole thing about like having good vibes,
Hmm.
well, that's what we do.
Right.
Like as musicians, like I feel like I'm charged
Hmm.
with putting good vibrations into the world. Now this is where it's going to get really crazy, because like if you subscribe to the butterfly effect at all,
Hmm.
it's like what I'm doing in the moment actually has like eternal consequences,
Exactly.
Yeah.
right?
This is the opposite
Because
of nihilism, everybody. This is the opposite of nihilism.
yeah, and so and I don't usually get this deep, especially on a podcast, but like, but I guess what I'm saying is that like I have realized more in the last year that part of my personal charge, I guess, so that I feel good about my life is speaking up for these things that I think are really important, because being a jazz musician, oh, screw that. I mean, like just being a musician is so much more important than just knowing some tunes and being able to get through a gig.
Hmm.
It's this, it's this, it's look, we've all followed it this far. It's so hard. You guys are smart guys. I like to think I'm a pretty smart guy. If I just wanted to go make money, I could figure out an easier way to do it than this,
Hmm.
right? So would it be accurate to say that those of us who are serious about this, it's more like a calling than a job,
Hmm.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
And
Calling.
um, that's kind of what this silence has really helped me, or this quiet time has really helped me uh, maybe have enough courage to like talk about, is that like that this is kind of a calling, and now I don't appreciate people who are negative about my calling,
Hmm.
right? It's more than
Yeah.
just the job. Hey, I've been
Exactly.
lucky. Like I'm never gonna be the guy that's like, oh, this business is so tough. Like this business is good to me for some reason, whatever it is.
Hmm.
Like I've done fine, but like I don't want to discourage anybody else from that.
Right.
Who am I to say that like this is going away? Like,
Yeah.
Right.
especially somebody who like hacks their way through summertime,
Hmm.
like you don't get the right to say that.
No.
Yeah.
Like I'll start worrying if Herbie Hancock says, yeah, I don't see this going anywhere.
Hmm.
Well, guess what? Like Herbie's not going to say this isn't going anywhere, because
No way.
Herbie knows that it's going
Hmm.
somewhere. And he knows that it's more important than the money also. And he's got a lot of money. And it's not because he has the money that he thinks that it's more important than money. It's like, look, the money will show up.
Hmm.
The money will show up. It might not be, like billions or millions, but like the money will show up. What we need in this world is more authentic humans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And art is a way you find out real fast of who you are in an authentic way.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa.
Have you seen? I'm sure you've seen that movie, Masters of the Universe.
Yeah,
He-Man,
right.
Masters of the Universe.
Yeah,
The whole point of that movie is that like interdimensional technology is just the manipulation of sounds of musical notes,
right.
and there's a scene where the little scientist, little person guy meets the human male protagonist who is a keyboardist musician, and
Yeah,
he especially really loves synths, like synthesizers.
yeah,
And the scientist from another dimension is like, we need somebody that knows the frequencies and in the right order to unlock
in the
to
right order.
unlock the
Yeah,
door, the other door.
yeah,
And the guy's like, you mean da da? Yeah, and he sings it.
yeah.
And the scientist guy says, you're a are you a master of the frequencies? I didn't know you were a master of the frequencies. And I'm
Right.
like, he's just a musician, and you're like, we're talking about right now. It's like we're the masters
That's
of these
sweet.
frequencies. You know what I mean?
I teach a theory class, for guitar players at the university, Utah State University, where I teach, and I tell them from the very beginning, I'm like, look, here's what you got to understand. I said, we call this music theory, but I said, what you're really learning how to do is control vibrations.
Yeah.
Right, that's what we're really learning to do, is like when you study music theory, and when you put it into practice, of course,
Mm-hmm.
is you're learning to control frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
You're learning how to control sound. That's deeper than just saying, oh, I can play some tunes, right?
Right.
I mean, it's like, because if you go back in our conversation and you talk about it, it's like frequencies are used to heal.
Right.
Frequencies are used to destroy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, frequencies are used to build, frequencies are used to break down. There's like, we're kind of studying this thing to become kind of its power, right?
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, it's a very powerful thing that we have set out to learn how to do. And with power comes responsibility. And that's why I'm like, look, if you're going to do this, be really, really good at it.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to be really good at it, that's okay. You should still do it to a certain level,
Right.
but you don't get to have the same conversation rights as somebody who is doing it really, really well. Like, you don't, like, somebody who hasn't put in the time and made the sacrifice for playing Black American music
Mm-hmm.
doesn't get to tell me that Black American music doesn't have any worth. I like, well, they can say it, they can do whatever they want. They don't get to say it without a rebuttal anymore, I guess is what I'm saying. From now on, I'm done being quiet in that conversation. Because it's like you said, if we're the masters of the frequency, then we believe in the frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
And if we believe in the frequencies, we're obligated to defend the frequencies.
This could go down such an interesting rabbit hole, but I think it's also like a pretty good spot
Yeah. Yeah,
to
totally.
leave
I
off.
love that idea of the keepers of the frequency, the masters of it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want to like
I was gonna go off on that right now.
I
was
want to
gonna
watch He-Man now.
It's a great name for a band, isn't it?
Masters of the
Yeah,
frequencies,
and
yeah.
we can all be
Masters of the frequencies.
like
I mean,
Friar
there's
Rose.
probably not going to be a straight ahead band.
No,
I mean,
no.
it's like prog rock, probably.
Probably, or some type
Or-
of Sun Ra situation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
maybe.
Real
Yeah.
quick.
Definitely.
I bought a.
Yeah, you'd have to have the outfit to go with that band. Like, you can show up looking like me to play in Masters
Yeah.
of the Frequency.
Yeah.
Well,
No,
maybe
no,
if
no.
you were the only guy.
Real quick, I bought my girlfriend, who's actually really into Sun Ra, a vinyl that I found in Cincinnati. And even still, I keep forgetting the name of the vinyl. It's so dumb. But they're like, it's yellow. They're on a boat. It looks like an Egyptian artwork. And we put it on the other day when I got back. And it is just noise. It's truly noise compared to like
Yeah.
some of the other stuff. And we're listening to it in bed and we're like, wow, this is just out there, straight out there. But I'm into it at the same time, and it's like it's a meditative kind of spiritual thing where all these frequencies are just coming together and they're clashing and they're creating these feelings inside of you. So whatever, it's super cool.
That's what we do,
Corey,
baby.
thanks for coming on, man. This was
Hey,
wonderful.
thanks for having me, guys. Man, I had a great time. Man, it's good, man. Chet, it's great to catch up with you again.
Yeah, it was cool. I'm gonna send you
I'm
gonna send you a friend request on Facebook, and we'll be able to stay up to date a little bit more.
Okay, yeah, let's do it. Yeah, that makes me very happy to hear that. That'll be great. Armin, it's great to see you again too, man.
It's so great to see you. I'm obviously gonna see your project when it comes through, but let me see if there's any links you want me to also include in this video, and when we share this video, let me know. We'll post all that good stuff. We might do a product placement, but you don't have to be there for that. You can go, and yeah, let's stay in touch, because this isn't going to be the last one, or the first one. I mean,
no, okay. I'd love to come back and hang out with you guys again. This was a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Corey.
Live, you guys.
Yep.
Seriously, you're doing your part. That's awesome.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you. It means a lot. I'll see you soon. Thank you.
See you, man.